in dealing with energy, you really are in service. And that is probably the broadest of the concepts, is that in the cosmic world, in the energetic world, we're there, we're dancing there because we're in service.
You're listening to Catalyst Talks, conversations with change agents, outliers, superheroes, and truly conscious leaders modeling what it is to be an unstoppable force for good in this world. What lit these catalysts on fire to do their work, and what nuggets of wisdom can they share with a world literally on fire? This podcast is for you who cares deeply and seeks to catalyze the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Trager. I'm a consciousness catalyst and soul coach to superstar change agents in business, leadership, and life. In this podcast, I wear an eclectic mix of hats, including earthkeeper, healer, mindset coach, lawyer, business, sustainability, and impact strategist. My intention is holding space for higher purpose, peak wellness, and soul mastery so we can live in harmony with ourselves, each other, and nature. The whole idea of Catalyst Talks in these conversations is to awaken consciousness, unlock higher purpose, and learn what it really takes to catalyze change in that scale. Subscribe to our new podcast and help us grow. We're aiming to reach 1 million people at least in 2020. Let's wake up the world together. My guest today on Catalyst Talks podcast is Peter Bonaker. Peter is a friend, a teacher, a healer of mine. He is the author of Sacred Shield, Shamanic Protection for the World Today. Peter's a social scientist and a shamanic energy medicine practitioner with more than 15 years of experience. He lives in Denver, Colorado, and teaches his methods of shamanic healing and protection throughout the world. I had the honor of studying with Peter many years ago and have continued to benefit from his brilliance. And we're really here today to out some energies, some things that most folks don't really want to talk about. If you are somebody who explores other realms, other dimensions, energies, and other forms, then this is the conversation for you. And if this is new to you, I really invite you to take a listen to this, because what we talk about will probably resonate on some level, some level personally or for what we're experiencing in the collective. So Peter Bonaker, my teacher, my healer, my friend, thank you for being here with us today. I've been so looking forward to this conversation with you because you are one of the few who has such a deep understanding and willingness to out what we're going to dive in today. And this topic is near and dear to my heart and my experience. And as you are a beacon of light in navigating this terrain and really giving voice to the coordinates of this energy that I think many people want to understand right now, I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you, especially in the chaos that's going on in the world. So we're going to talk about your recent book, Sacred Shield, Shamanic Protection for the World Today. Oh my gosh, we all need this book right now. And we're going to talk all things shamanism, energy, and the soul. So Peter, where are you today?
Where am I today? I am most pleased for the invitation to be with you, spend some time with you today. And I'm very excited for the emergence of this book and for people to become aware of it. And my total goal in writing it was to bring information to the world. And you, with this invitation, are bringing that into reality. Thank you.
So where are you physically? Where are you physically today?
I'm in Frisco, Colorado, up in the mountains. I'm sitting at about 9,000 feet above sea level. I'm sitting also in smoke from four wildfires that are burning essentially out of control to the north. In northern Colorado and in southern Wyoming. Plus, we get smoke from the California fires. So it's nice to bring that to the fore right off, because it is certainly one of the pressingest issues on our forefront now. Is, the Western United States is on fire, and we've been in drought. And so when I listen to the machinations of the politics And they said, oh, it's all so wonderful. It's not. I mean, they needed to make the drive I made yesterday from Denver, Colorado up into the mountains. I couldn't see anything but an outline of the mountains. The smoke is that bad. So not where I wanted to go, but that is where I'm sitting right now.
We're going to go so deep right now and unpack things, but I want to hear how you see the world right now. And I first want people to hear a little bit more about what your book is about, because I believe that the fires and the nonsense going on so many levels in the world, the extremes that we're experiencing have to do with what you write about. Tell us what your book is about.
Yes, the Sacred Shield, Shamanic Protection for the World Today, is about ultimately a very dark, insidious kind of energetic form that really comes from another source. It's coming from some place that we're really not familiar with. It's utilizing a technology that we're really not familiar with. And it's probably been around a long time. In the book, I reference an author as far back as 100 years ago named Simone Weil, who was writing about exactly this. And, she was a person who was born right before the First World War, went through the Great Depression, lived through the Second World War, or more or less died maybe toward the end of that. And she was, seeing the same thing. So this is an energetic form that has been present. It's just right now, it is pervasive. And to know the percentage of incidents for it is a little bit hard to estimate. Just from my own data, I would say 20% of the population has it. It could be higher, it could be lower, but it's notable. And so this book is about, first of all, it has to have a context in order to understand what I ultimately wanted to write about. So in the first 3 chapters, it's about shamanism, and it's about your energetic body and how we see it, how we experience it. And then it dives deeper and goes into aspects of defining what the energetic form is, defining how the energy enters the body. This energy I'm talking about is an opportunistic entity. So when a person is vulnerable, when they're down for one reason or another, that's where this energy enters the soul at. And when it comes in, once it sets, and if it sets for a long time, it's pretty devastating and can be extremely difficult. My sense was, when I was writing the book, in most writing about the energetic world, very little attention is given to the truly dark side, and the dangers that exist. There's a vulnerability that happens. Sometimes, for instance, a meditation, if someone deeply, deeply ensconced in meditation and the process of meditation can accidentally find themselves vulnerable and open themselves up in ways that allows an energetic form like this to come in. So that is also part of what this book is sort of a notice, a warning, a suggestion that one has to be careful when they open up into the energetic world. Some people call it a Kundalini awakening, and all of a sudden they're, totally become aware of the cosmic nature of the world, of the world that we can't see, and they dive deeply very quickly. And there's lots of reason to be cautious, to be careful about, just not every energy out there is a perfectly wonderful energy. There are some dark ones that are looking to find their a place where they can reside.
And what was your path to really recognizing that this was something that you were being called to hold?
That's a great question, and one that I couldn't say I exactly know the answer to. So, I had the awakening of my own call to step into the energetic world, so to speak. And then very quickly, as I began in the training for it, I would say one of the first things that happened for me was I realized that I was remembering the work as opposed to learning the work. And that the training was opening the door to that remembering. And then very rapidly, as I worked with that, it became very evident to me that I was going to be in the role of being the healer's healer. And so many of the people coming to me were people that were in practice. And surprisingly, to me, and it very early on, before I was just a total neophyte. And here's people calling me that are, touch healers. One of the people very high in the organization that I was training with called me and said, I want you to do a session with me. And I was just in the second class, and I was like dumbfounded. So, but what happened with that is that I have a background as an educator. And so the content and the education background combined to allow me to teach at a very sophisticated level. And with that same organization, the Four Winds, that I was in the training with, I very soon became an assistant teacher and then a full-blown teacher, and have been in that role. I was in that role for about 12 years. I recently left that organization, probably having to do with writing the book and needing to be more on my own in order to complete it. So not with any animosity or anything like that, with only deep regard for the Four Winds and for Alberto Vialdo, who was the head of that. So that then led in the teaching to where I was teaching a very specific course, and it was called Walking with Protection. And that course was very Jungian in nature and shadow, dealing with shadow. And so over time, I not only would meet all people that were going through the curriculum, because I was teaching
including me 10 years ago.
Okay, 10 years ago. Oh my goodness, Stephanie. And that course dealt with bringing out the shadow, with the shadow being, the concept being that something that's plagued you all of your life, it's driven you, and that when you could bring it up to the light, then it becomes transparent. It becomes data rather than this high driving emotional force. And so over that time, people would say literally, I don't think I can deal with what you have, call Peter. And so I had this database that was literally, in statistical terms, it would be called a skewed database. It was leaning way over to the side of people who were suffering very deep challenges in their life. And then, to answer your question very directly, what happened was I began seeing a pattern, and that pattern kept repeating and repeating and repeating. And that's what's in this book, and I named it finally in the writing as Mordrigal, which is an energetic form. And then a protocol emerged. And that happened over a great deal of time, well over 500 sessions. And where this form presented itself to me. So it wasn't like I asked for it or I went looking for it. It presented itself to me. And for any variety of reasons, I could see it. And I think my sense was that not very many other people were seeing it. And so that's really the essence of what the book is about, is that scene that came forth, and then the manner of dealing with it and starting to bring it forth so that there's strategies to deal with it.
That's why I was one of those people that said, I need to work with you. And I took I was in your class about 10 years ago at the Four Winds. And it was really profound for me because it was giving me a language for what I understood, because I had experience seeing this energy for most of my life, whether seeing it in others or experiencing it in other ways, and wanting to understand. And I think you were this beacon, the person, because I've heard, oh, you got to call Peter Bonaker for that. I've heard that before. So yeah, what really stood out to me, what you just said before about people who dive into the work and they dive all in, and they sometimes encounter different energies, and they don't know what to do with that. Or let's talk about responsibility for a minute, because there's so much. The great thing is people are awakening on the planet. The great thing is people are becoming more spiritually aware and more in tune with soul. And so it is opening portals and energy. And then there's also the dilution of a lot of things as well. So I'd love to hear you talk about what you think some of the protocols of respect or permission should be when working with the sacred.
Yes, indeed. I would say that a defining aspect of shamanism, there's several. First of all, in dealing with energy, you really are in service. And that is probably the broadest of the concepts, is that in the cosmic world, in the energetic world, we're there, we're dancing there because we're in service. And that's the shamanic saying, but that's really applies to all of us on every level, is that if you're not in service either to yourself or to others, then it's pretty questionable. Why are you doing what you're doing? The second is that the defining characteristic of a shaman versus a sorcerer, or someone who is on that dark side, is that they're working without permission. So when I engage with an individual, it's because they've asked me to. And I've said, do I have your permission to work with you? And that includes tracking them and then diving in deeper. And by tracking, just a quick clarification on that, one of the ways I describe what tracking is, when you say the term tracking, is like your checkbook, or your bank account. You have an idea of where you are. Okay, do I have enough money to buy this or that or the other thing? That's tracking. You're tracking. Well, in tracking in the shamanic world, we're tracking people's energy. And if you're doing that without a person's permission, you're not working in service. You're potentially hurting that person. And so a great example would be this energetic form. it doesn't have your permission to come in. And, and occasionally it disguises itself as though it's a benevolent, going to take you to some wonderful place. And the individual does give permission to it. And when that happens, the scenario is very serious and very deep. And this energetic form will set itself very, very deep in the individual. Many people just naively give it a passive permission, perhaps. And
so when people are unaware, right? You talk about it in the book. Often it's and this is my experience too. Is where there's trauma, where you mentioned before, where there's the low points. This can enter, and I want to talk about, yes, there's like the whole individual aspect of this energy. You also talk about Withico, right? And that
yes.
in the Native American sense, what does that mean? What is Withico?
Withico was described, I mentioned two authors who really described Withico, but one in particular was a gentleman named Jack Forbes, and he was a Native American professor in the California university system, and founded the Native American Studies, and was a professor emeritus, etc. And in his writings, he described Withico as an energetic form that the Native American population has been aware of for many, many millennia. And he didn't exactly go back and put a date on it, I don't believe, but it and describes Columbus as being Withico. It's a cannibalistic kind of energy that is into, not literally consuming flesh, but consuming one's energy, consuming a soul. And that's Withico. That's the term Withico comes from that population, that culture, and really defines this. And for Jack Forbes, it was ubiquitous. He goes back and he describes Hitler and that whole SS as that was Withico, that was consuming people, and goes back to Columbus, Christopher Columbus, as Withico, bringing that consumption of people's souls in the Americas. And so his was very, very broad. He really cast an entire society within it. Then there was a later writer who took that Jack Forbes work, and he's a contemporary named Paul Levy, whom I have not met. I've not talked with. I'm interested to do that one day. But he takes it and describes it in much more current terms. And he's those two are the writers, actually the three are the writers I'm aware of that have really gone in depth with this energetic form. And in the book, I try to clarify that the one difference that I'm attempting to bring forth is that there's a strategy to deal with it. And the both Jack Forbes and Paul Levy, I didn't sense that completely. Paul Levy gives it a lot of breadth, this Withico energy, as calling an individual, calling a culture to have to heal. They have to deal, giving no pass on it. And that's true to a certain extent. A person who's suffering with this energetic form really, in order to survive, has to deal with it. And but per se, what I think is different for Sacred Shield is that I'm presenting for general use, for those who are able, a means to deal with it, and specifically to get it off of individuals. And that's uniquely different. I'm calling it the Madrigal Protocol. And, it's the Withico Protocol. It's the Simone Weil called it an affliction of the soul. That was her terminology 100 years ago. So,
for thousands of years, ancient civilizations have probably understood the energy with a different word, right? A different name, because at some point it was unleashed, right, on the planet. And maybe we don't know where or how, but it is really helpful to understand what it's doing. And I think I want to just say that there's probably people listening who might experience depression or might be resonating with this, right? And it's like really just important to take this in, but just, to not project onto yourself or anything, like just be listening and
absolutely. Very important. Thank you for the clarification, because that's really true. It's like when you are studying a particular field and you personalize it, and then all of a sudden every symptom you've just read you have. And I think that's what you're talking about. And to not go there is appropriate. And yet, if it resonates deeply, then let's seek help.
Yeah, I think this is really important, how there's a lot of people who really want to just keep it high vibration, talk about the light. And in doing that, I think it's also because people are mindful of the words, right? We don't want to call this in. We don't want to say the name, right? Unless you have an understanding of what to do with it or how to work with it. And I've walked that path for a long time because I understand the severity, the intensity. And so what would you say to people who are practitioners, who are kind of, who don't know how to even see it?
Number one, seeing it is very difficult. And that opens another door here in this discussion. If you have fear, that fear will absolutely prevent one's ability to see this energy, because it is a fearful energy. And so you have to be very resolute within yourself and settled with the whole idea of fear. And so what I've learned by having, teaching many practitioners, is that not all can do it. Not all can see it. And in the book, I'm trying to give a clue as to what to look for, a pattern. And if, as a practitioner, they can open up in a way that they can yield to it and see it, that will open the door to a much greater level of healing capacity for them. And that would be my invitation to the practitioner, to deal with that, to learn to deal with that. Fear, when one of my former students fed it back to me, he said, fear is no friend of us. It's no friend. And it prevents many, many things from happening when a person goes into fear. So it's worthy of some discussion, probably, and work around it. And it's difficult. It's a difficult subject to kind of get your arms around completely, of why are people fearful, and then how do you deal with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned also light is more powerful than darkness, but darkness can be louder, and like the volume can be high. And if you're experiencing that, and
Yes.
you feel it, right? You might not have the language for it. And I think so much of what you're talking to and what you put into words in the book and you can speak about and hold is a language. And most people don't have the language. We have the cognitive Freudian psychology language, depression and Prozac and pills and whatever, right? But people
Yes.
really don't have the language. And so that's what it's so important. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. So, what do you think is so where we are as a humanity? I'm just going to kind of broaden it out, because each one of
Yes.
us, right, when you do this work, when you recognize there's a thing, it's an opportunity, you said, to do your own personal healing. And you end up actually, if you can get through this, you end up becoming such a different person, because you have to heal certain things that allowed this to be there in the first place. And
Right.
so when we talk about Withico, I want to hear you talk about how you see this as an opportunity for humanity to heal right now.
That's a tall order. However, the times that we're in, it's not a quantum leap for me to say this energetic aspect. It's like a species of energy is very prolific now in our world. It's present and it's operational, and you can take any number of examples, and I'm not going to suggest any by name, and you could apply the concepts that are emerging, like this Withico cannibalism, uh, and you could see that there's some very powerful people in powerful positions that could well be fully under the influence of this energy. So, the presence of this book, the emergence of this book for me was beginning to bring it forth, was beginning to literally out this energy, to put it out in front of people to see. And to me, it's minuscule. It's just a little tip of the iceberg. That a book is just a book. You have to read it. You have to be aware of it. And then be interested enough to get it, and then to read it. So I don't have unrealistic expectations, I don't think, but I am also at the same time hopeful that it does begin to bring light, and that light can emerge. In preparing to talk to you, one of the last things you mentioned was nuggets of wisdom, and I wanted to save it to the end, but I can't. Okay, and that is because what I see happening in the world now is that the divine feminine is emerging, and it's long overdue. And when things come to birth, old things put up a big fight before they'll relinquish their space. And we have a very dark masculine history. And in so many ways, in the writing of this book, I really feel like I was addressing the feminine, the female gender. And because the soul fractures that have happened in our society that are more incredibly present than I could have ever dreamt in my wildest imagination is the violation and the mishandling sexually of so many people. And it's not just restricted to male against female, but the level of infraction of the soul for the female is great, when just by the physiological nature of the two genders, the feminine is the one who has suffered deeply and greatly, and that has to be healed, because when those wounds take place, they create shame within the individual. And if I were to say the one ingredient that this entity is able to attack through is through the emotion of shame. And shame comes from violation. It's a very low conscious level, and we don't deal with it. We don't deal with it as a culture, as societies, as a world culture. I mean, there's still practices of female genital mutilation going on. And those are all things that bring in and open up the door for these dark energies to prevail and to take over one's soul and completely ensconce. And so in our world today, it's the beginning of talking about what's real. And if there's shame, let's call it shame. Let's go there and deal with it. Don't just throw somebody out the door and say, oh, you were a bad guy. Bye. No. What caused him or her to do that behavior? And then what happened to the victim of that behavior? And what are the consequences? And so, overtly, at two places in the book, I wrote so gently. I feel I wrote gently about it. But all of this activity to try to legislate, a lack of choice for a woman is beyond for me. Because when violence has occurred and it results in conception, it's unconscionable that there are people sitting in legislatures legislating that there's no right to deal with that. It's unconscionable. And in that sense, they're perpetrators as well. And, I can't not say that, because I've seen the devastation piled upon devastation of the soul, wreaked in havoc, and feeling so ashamed of themselves. And in our society, we don't have any place to put it. We don't have any place to talk about it. And that, if I'm lending something to our next world, to where we're trying to go, it's that. I believe it's that. It's like, let's listen, let's hear, let's not be afraid, let's not have fear around the subject of being violated. And those who deal with those who are violated, you take all of the first responders, all of the police, the nurses, the people sitting, the doctors who are dealing with death every single day. And where's the vehicle for them to live with that, to talk about that, to put it out? Because they're human, they're taking it in, and their soul is living with that. And so how do you hold that? What do you do with it? So it's a matter of birthing an openness to our society, our world society, to say, let's start being honest. Let's start really dealing. And in that sense, I think we're at an awakening moment. And that the divine feminine merging with the divine masculine is coming. It's coming. It's on the table for us. And we're ready. We're ready for that. That's balance. That's where we will find love, and we will find our footing in life. I believe that with all my heart and soul.
That was beautiful. One of the things that kept popping in my head as you were speaking was the way the world, like where there is this huge awakening and opening, heart opening. There's also the institutional world that is trying, or is, let me not say trying, that is actually, working on dealing that in the institutional way with gender and racial diversity and, initiatives and all, equality. And I see great efforts in the work I do and in the places I roam. And I'm always kind of, it's a very interesting place, because sometimes it's it's still the divine it's still the masculine. They're not divine masculine. It's still the masculine. It's still, it's just in a different, right? It's just, it's a patchwork. It's not the deeper healing.
Right.
So,
It is. It's superficial. I would agree with that. And it's time to leave the superficial. And, that's what you're inviting me to do. And that's what you're doing. And bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're inspiring. You're inspiring me because this, like, let's just talk about shame for a minute. It is like, shame is a frequency. And you talked about in the book that this energy, these energies it's a frequency, and how I think not everybody is aware of what that really means, frequencies and energies, and, even talking about the soul. So how would you anchor in that, the energy of frequency, the meaning for people, so they can really see how all these pieces work together?
I don't want to go in depth into this, but there is a particular writer who frequency brings up another concept for me. And I mentioned it in the book. And as I was being edited, it was like, you're saying too much about that, and like, let it rest. So I took out most of what I wrote with that. But his name is David Hawkins, and it's a book called Power versus Force. And he goes into some interesting things, muscle testing. It's the definitive volume and work around what muscle testing is. And for your audience, if you aren't aware of it, you should become aware of it, because it's access to universal knowledge. And that's all I'm going to say, but it's an important piece. But with that, he was able to calibrate levels of consciousness. And it was remarkable, because he went on a scale from 0 to 1,000 and took all of the emotions, and he calibrated it with large audiences and groups of people as to what level, these certain emotions were at. So an example, from 700 to 1,000 would be considered enlightenment. And go to love would be at 500, and then it varies. But at 200, in this level of 200, things above 200 were positive, and things below were in the negative force, and pulled people down. Well, lo and behold, in terms of vibration, the lowest of all of the emotional vibrations, shame. And on a scale of 0 to 1,000, it came in at 20. That's like no life force. That's like, in my book, on the title, subtitle in the chapter on soul fractures, I subtitle it as shame is the bottom line in suicide. And it really, truly, it is. The life force is gone. So in the vibration of shame that you're asking about, it's the low end. It's the low end of the scale. It's the low end of the bargain. And if you feel shame, it's appropriate to deal with it and to start finding a way to get through it. And it's not easy. It's just not easy.
It's not easy, and it's not easy to do alone either. It's harder to do alone. So yeah, if that's something, if this is landing somewhere, it's time to reach for help, because that can be a compound to it, right? It's like, if you feel too ashamed to ask for help, so you feel more shame because you ask for help. So that's part of
exactly
what's the word I'm looking for? That's part of the nemesis.
Yes, absolutely. It compounds it. It just it grows, and it doesn't get less. It grows, and we have to find our way through that. And as a society and a culture, we have to find our way through that. We have to open the door to this. And I know there's a few other people that have written extensively about shame and have a good handle on it. And I know I feel like I'm trying to make a contribution as well to this specifically.
Yes, and the way you're doing that is through this one way is the idea of a soul fracture. So what is that?
A soul fracture is like really a rip, a tear in the fabric of the soul, and shame is the biggest of them. And actually, one of the things that I do mention in the book, but only very lightly, is one of the things that happened for me in this work is I began seeing energetically shame. And I mean, that's like way over the top. That's like off the charts, quite honestly. And I began seeing a pit in the deep into the underworld of shame. And I began learning how to start extracting the energy from that. But that's energy, that's purely energetic, and yet it still sits in the consciousness. And so the work is always, back to where we were, earlier in this conversation. Another aspect of the shamanism is that the shaman's holding space for the client to do their work. And so when someone comes to you, it says, please work with me, which I heard from someone right here, right now. And it was that I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready. I don't want you to fix me. I'm ready to do the work. Hold my hand. Hold me so that I can do this. And that's truly what the shaman is someone who's holding sacred space so that the person can work with it, work with what's there. And yes, we facilitate, but at the end of the day, the work is always the client's. And, and like I've said so many times, people say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's always the same. Thank yourself. Thank yourself for stepping into the work.
Yes. And what is so powerful? This is not easy work. This is not an easy path. That's why not everyone is on it. And from the shaman, the healer, to the participant, you have to have that intentionality, right? The intention. But the interesting thing is that if you really step in and do the work and heal, you really heal at the deepest of level, where in a lot of other modalities or just in general Western medicine, you don't get to really heal. And I went to a doctor, I took a medicine. It's not like I did the work and healed. It's a lot of times people even go to healers and say, I was healed. He healed me, or she healed me. But that's not always true. It's like, I was the vessel. I was prepared to do the work, and we co-created healing, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's being cured, and there's being healed. In healing, what comes up for me in this part of the discussion is that when you really truly heal, you walk in freedom. I see someone named Stephanie Trager walking in freedom, truly walking in freedom. And that was part of the journey that I had the honor to be part of.
When you started talking about the energy, and before you might have even had a name, right? You started talking about it. I remember being in a workshop of yours a few years ago, and it was, what was the biggest challenge for you in really stepping in and saying, I'm outing this? Because it wasn't in the beginning, right? So what was the biggest challenge for you?
The biggest challenge was the fear of bringing it forth. And I'll tell you exactly what that looked like. One of the earliest things that I realized in working with clients who were exhibiting this was that one of the first things I could say to that client was, you're not crazy, okay? And you could palpably see the relief in their face, or you could hear it, of total relief. Somebody saying to them, you're not crazy. Because in this world, that looks like craziness. And people who are near and dear to you, who love you with all their heart, and they don't know what to do, will put you in a psych hospital or will do whatever. If they see that you're suicidal, if you've lost so much self-esteem that you're not getting down the road. Saying you're not crazy was really important, because the client then would say, oh my God, there's somebody going to listen to me and actually where I am, and they don't think I'm ready for a psych hospital or I need medication. So for me, then take that I was seeing this, and I'm dealing with people who everybody's saying is crazy, and I'm looking at it saying you're not crazy. And my fear was, to my dearest colleagues who couldn't see what I was seeing, was that they were going to say, Bonaker, you're crazy. You're just nuts. And so that was my challenge, was to bring it forth. And one of the workshops I remember that you were at, it was like the first time that I really, in public, put it all on the line and said, this is what's going on. And then from there, classes started to emerge, and I was able to start teaching to it, and then starting to learn more about it because more people were seeing it. And so it was, like writing this book was a very big challenge, because I will tell you, quite frankly, I was attacked numerous times. And because this entity did not want this book to come out. So that's the journey that I've had to go through to get to here. And I'm so honored to be able to speak to it with you in this format. Thank you so much for the opportunity to bring it forth more so.
Thank you, Peter. I'm all about speaking your truth, and I am so grateful that you're modeling it, because I've been seeing this energy since I was a kid, and I had a journey with that, and you were probably a portal out of a dark place for me, because I didn't have the language. And I've even noticed in this last year of really seeing things and wanting to talk, like I have this podcast, I have this platform, and wanting to talk about things in like I'm using you as a surrogate right now, by the way.
That's fine.
Wanting to talk about this, right? And and not really having the confidence, outing myself here, not really having the confidence because of what other people might think I'm crazy, and also because I know what this thing is, and I didn't want it to come near me. So
absolutely. And I think most people like yourself who are aware of it and have experienced it and had to live through it to get past it are generally not wanting to talk about it because they don't want to reactivate it. And that's very real. And what I want to say to you, Stephanie, is that once this book came out, like for me, the attacks stopped completely, because done. And I'm going to generalize that to you as well. Done. Okay.
Done. Totally.
Done.
Y'all who are listening, this is all we're talking about from now on. Okay. I'm on with Peter. We're outing this thing.
Yeah. Right on.
It is. I mean, it is an interesting when you're in the world of shamanism and you're working with healers. So they're already like a large percentage of the way towards like open to hearing and learning. Right.
Yes.
And if I'm not in that world all the time. And so it really is a kind of how do you censor and how do you talk about certain things when you see, and it's just a different paradigm altogether. And so what I do see, and I want to hear what you think about this, is that so many people, I'd say in the mainstream world, which is even, books on self-help and personal development are numerous, right? And books on climate and sustainability and regenerative societies, numerous. And so it's very intellectual. And there's a lot of processing that's very intellectual and emotional, but it's not really hitting the soul. And so talk to us about the different levels of healing or levels of perceiving, because I think most people are stuck in that intellectual linear space and the space of emotion. And it's the soul. And that's the collective healing we need to do. So we need to all be doing our soul work. What do you see as the way that mainstream is going to get that?
Ask big, hard questions, would you please? The first part of your question, I can answer best by something called the shaman's purview. And purview is a very interesting term because it's much larger than view. It's really how you're holding things. And when I often will describe the work as having 4 perceptual levels or 4 levels of awareness. And so ride with me with this. And I know that you are aware of what I'm going to say, but the first level is the literal level. And that's very much allopathic medicine. That's literal. You know, you break your arm, by God, go to a doctor and get it set. And that's literal. But then there's the next level, which is symbolic, which is, well, why did I break my arm? What happened to me that I put myself in that situation? Or what in the world happened with that? And that's pretty much where Western medicine has resided, is in the literal and in the symbolic. When you go into the shamanic level, we call it the mythic level. And that's where the soul resides. That's where the soul travels at. And the soul, separate from the physical body, is carrying the information of your ancestors. It's carrying the informations of your past lives, if that's something you believe in or subscribe to. I never split hairs on that, whether it's ancestral inheritance or past life coming forth. And then, and that's where the information comes from the past, the DNA, if you will. And that's how it goes forward. And so when we depart this world, we separate our physical body from our soul body. Our soul body goes on, our physical body goes wherever it's going to go at that point. And then the 4th level is really the level of spirit, the level of pure energy. And so, where we are is, and I think the door is opening in a very large way. And that's all of the stuff that, I don't know if we call it New Age or spiritual or cosmic, whatever term you want. It's beginning to understand that there is a lot between the cause and the effect. We are coming out of, hundreds, if not thousands of years of there's a cause and there's effect. And there's nothing else. But in reality, and that's why we don't really have a vocabulary, in reality, maybe there was something under my bed when I was growing up, or there was something in my closet. And my parents chose to say, no, Peter, don't go there. You're going to be considered crazy if you talk like that anymore. So stop it. And as an entire world, we've stopped that level of conversation. And so by opening that door, we open the door to seeing the soul and to understanding the soul and to healing the soul. And that's where our work is now. Our work is there. Just momentarily back to power versus force. If you hold that frame, powering and forcing are 2 very different things. Force comes from, you will do this, you got a gun pointed at your head. That is force. Power is I'm healing myself inside and I'm coming forward with strength of who I am, and I'm walking within my soul, and I'm walking in my freedom, and I'm walking in a healed condition. That's power. And it's not real hard to look around us and see who's using force and who's using power.
That was so good.
I rest on the shoulders of some really brilliant people, okay, and their writing and their work.
But that was poignant right there. You know, as we're talking about opening this space for the soul and how it's happening more and more, when you talk about the energy, the mordigal, the what's an overlay, and how you say in your book that it breaks the connection between the physical body and the higher self or energetic body. So explain what that means in the context of what you just said.
In in the book in particular, there's one drawing in there that I'm very, very happy and proud of. And it shows how the chakra system really works. And chakras are universal. They're in many of our religions, many forms of practices. Yoga lives with chakras, you know, in a major sort of way. By the way, yogis were really our first shamans in the world, I do believe. And so your chakras, you have 7 main body chakras. You have many small chakras like at joints and knuckles and elbows and shoulders, but you have 7 main body chakras. And just quickly, you have a root chakra, which is your first chakra. It's around the genitalia. The second chakra is right at the navel, or like we always say, 2 fingers below the belly button to put it into easy terms. The third chakra is at the solar plex, which is right below your rib cage, and it helps you to breathe. The fourth chakra is at your heart. The fifth chakra is your throat, which is pivotal, obviously, to language and connection between your lower body and your higher body. And then there's what we often call the third eye. It's on the forehead, and that's the 6th chakra. And then on the top of the head is the crown chakra. So there's 7 main body chakras. And then just to mention now, there's also an 8th chakra that we really carry spirit in, or we carry light and love. It's you know, any way you want to describe it. And then also some discussion happens around the 9th chakra that is pretty much out of reach for us. And what the chakra system does is it comes out, it originates at the spinal cord, and it comes out, and it's like a little a torus or a little tornado, like it's like a little funnel cloud, and go out about 12 inches or so from your body, and spinning around is your chakra. You can sense the chakra. We use a pendulum to look at chakras for whatever that's worth to you. And then you take that chakra and go and continue it on, and that is the connection to the soul body. In the book, I frame it as the song of the soul, which is another way of, you know, being less woo-woo, I hope, and, you know, saying we all have a song. We come in with a song, a hum, you know, it's not particularly language, it's emotions, it's feelings. And as we are in tune with ourselves, we know that song of our soul. We're home when we hear that song. Well, this energy will come in, and the reason it's so very, very devastating to the individual is that it's like you take, you know, like when you get an x-ray. I was just at the dentist and they lay that big lead coat on you. Well, that cut off my chakras. And this energy has that same ability. It just goes in, cuts the chakra system in half, and disconnects the individual from their higher self, from their soul self. And I very often say, on a scale of 1 to 10 of conditions that I really wouldn't want to have, I put up there at 9 to 10 being disconnected from my higher self. That is not something that you want to have happen. And that's what this energy does. That's the overt form that I see. And in the book, I'm asking practitioners, please look and know, because it will present itself in the way I know when the energy is present. And this is over 500 times. I want you to hear that. Over 500 times. I go over the chakras with my pendulum, holding the stone or the object that the person has put their energy into. And the first time over, they're all going clockwise. And they would be like, oh, perfect. This person is just sailing, just cooking with gas. But then I go over it again, and they're all going counterclockwise, which means they're not functioning. They're going backwards. They're reverse wired. And then I go over it a third time, and every one of the chakras is closed. And then that pattern just repeats and repeats and repeats to infinity. And it tells me that that's not the person's chakra system. That's this energetic form. And this energetic form has taken over the individual chakras, and thereby disconnected them from their higher self. And so that's the first and foremost level of what's happening when we start to intervene with this. And that's the first thing for a practitioner to look for. Is there a funny pattern? Is there something weird going on that you wouldn't expect to be happening? And does that get toward answering?
Yeah.
Good. And thank you, because that's so important. That's the essence of where this piece of, this information, this book goes forth to say, you can see this if you can open your eyes, and if you can set aside your fear, you can see it. It is seeable. And it's just hard to see.
Yes, I concur. It is seeable. It is seeable. And, I always see also, and I think this is another thing, right? This journey you've had for a long time, it's been like a path where you've been initiated in a way to be the person to either be speaking it, outing it, but you are clearly somebody who there's a relation with this energy. And or not. Cancel, clear, delete. But
yeah, no, it's true. It's right? True. Yes, I, for whatever reason, I've seen it, and it tries to hide from me. It's clever, but it can't. And so far, knock on wood. But no, I do see it, and it, it's getting sneakier, I think, as we go. But I do see it. And I've seen it for an age now, a long time.
Yeah. And speaking to that, I think that this is an invitation to people who see, who might, you mentioned there's various species, or, this can look different. You might have, this is your work, right? We have to always, right. I think we're in this time in our world where it's like, what is yours to do? And what is, you clearly stepped in service because this was yours to do, whatever, the work, the healing, let's just say, just in general, right? This is yours to do, and this specific path. And I think it's an invitation to people to own what is, and me too, like for us to really own what is on our path. And it might be like, for me, I see this energy, I see an energy that is, I see it in a different form. And I've been making sense of that. Like, it's really, important to be able to talk about it and make sense of whatever it is that you're picking up that might be yours to do. Right.
Absolutely. I believe wholeheartedly that, when I teach to this, people are able to see it in the same way. But there are people seeing it, but they're seeing it differently. And that's like legitimate. That's perfect. And, and the other thing I will just mention, because we're right here, is that when I have taught to it, when I've given a talk on it, when this happens, it's an invitation to say, this is where I am. I've gotten it to here. There's more to do. There's so much more to do to understand what this is. And so I give a broad invitation across the board, and hopefully that's apparent in the book. Please take this, work with it, help us get down where we're going. And, I'm right now just announced the book to people who have been in the advanced training, and inviting them to become part of a referral network, and to tell me if they're willing to work with this, if they see it. Tell me, how you worked with it, and what your cost structure is, so that I have a place to encourage people to go. And, and that was just a day or two ago that I managed to get that finally out. And I've had, already, 5 to 10 people, at least 5 people respond and say, yes, send me referrals. And that comes down to being past what I can hold. I can only hold so much, and so I'm looking forward to enlarging the competent network, the network of people who really do see it and are prepared and want to deal with it. It's just not everyone's cup of tea. There's no question about it, because it's very foreboding work. It's a tough piece to hold. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. And people often might actually try and run away, but you can't. You can only run so far. But if it's the song of your soul, it's the song.
You got to get it. You got to get it back. There's no choice. That song you got to hear your song, and that's just how it is. Yeah, it's called Walking in Freedom. Really,
Walking in Freedom. What would you say to people listening who are kind of, resonating with what you're saying, but it's new, and they're like, huh? Like, why would you encourage people to learn more about this?
What I would say to that is, over the course of time, people have told me, oh, you just have to love it. Okay, you have to love it and get it back to its proper place in the world, and that it'll find its place in the cosmos. And I struggled with that. I just struggled with that, is because when something wants an individual to kill themselves, I don't see very much redeeming value in that, and certainly not something to love. I finally resolved it for myself. And it's about loving yourself. It's about, because every molecule of care you give to yourself, that equates to less interest by this energy, because it's stepping in where there's self-disregard, where there's a lack of self-worth. And to love oneself is really the ultimate. And, I taught Walking with Protection for over 10 years. And we taught strategies and, a list as long as my arm of all the things you can do. And it always came down to, but really, there's only one. And that is, work from your heart and do your work. Those are the two things to get your way out. And so, to those who are listening, do your work. Do what's there. Deal with what's there. And, it doesn't have to be a shaman. There's other ways, but deal with it. If you're carrying painful shame in your heart and in your soul, get it, nail it, get rid of it, because it doesn't serve you. It doesn't give you any value added in your life. And it's draining you. And so find a way. And there's people out there dealing with it. And I think there's going to be more and more. And especially, I suppose my mission is to get us to start dealing with shame for what it is, and call it what it is, and not be afraid of it, really, and get rid of the fear, and just put it there and bring it out. And then when it's out, it doesn't have the power. It becomes transparent. It becomes data, and not this emotional laden enough to kill you. And, we don't want that. It's nothing is worth taking your life. You end up having to pay for it. You got to come back. You got to do it all again. So, killing yourself is not an option, really. Intellectually, make that a deal for yourself. If you struggle with that, make that a deal. It's like, it's not a strategy. It's not a worthwhile strategy. There's other ways. Nothing is so bad that you can't find someone to listen.
Peter, thank you so much. We'll share your book and where people can find you in the show notes. And yeah, everybody should be buying this book, Sacred Shield by Peter Bonaker, Shamanic Protection for the World Today. Thank you for writing this. Thank you for bringing this thing to the light and outing it. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my deepest and greatest honor.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Catalyst Talks. Stay tuned for what's up next, and please subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. You'll find those links at catalysttalks.com. Join us. We continue this conversation on social media, and if you'd like to reach out to me privately, you can send me a message at stephanietrager.com. Your attention here means the world to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.